Welcome to the State Coalition's program training on the semi-annual reporting form. The reporting periods are January to June. In this case, you need to submit your report by July 30th, and July to December. Reports are due January 30th. Thank you for accessing our recording. We hope that this training enables you to provide the most detailed and accurate reporting of your grant-funded work on your semi-annual progress report. Accurate data reporting is important for many reasons. Your quantitative and qualitative data enable WAWA's effectiveness to be measured. WAWA may create reports for OVW using your data and data from grantees across the country. These summary data reports support OVW to make requests for increased appropriations and to defend WAWA funding to decision makers. Your data also helps OVW to make sure federal funds are being spent appropriately and to measure the performance of grants programs. Additionally, every 2 years, the Attorney General is required to submit a report to Congress on the overall effectiveness of WAWA funding. WAWA grantee data makes up a significant part of that mandated report. The more consistently grantees fill out their reports, the more accurately WAWA's effectiveness can be measured through these means. Here are a few tips before we look at the progress reporting form page by page. Please read the separate instructions you have downloaded with the progress reporting form. There are many helpful examples to assist you in filling out the reporting form. Throughout this form, there are other categories listed for many questions. In general, we ask that you use the other category only if you cannot find a way to put the information into a category that already exists and is a close fit. When we aggregate data for reports, often responses in the other category will not get included in the report. However, there are some cases where other really is the only option to accurately capture what you are reporting. That is fine. We just ask that you take the time to rule out all the other options first. Additionally, if you do not have an other to report, leave the box blank. Please do not report not applicable, not yet, etc. Following most sections of the form, you will find optional narrative questions. Use these sections to talk about the unique success of your grant-funded activities. Talk about the impact grant-funded activities have made on your community or for survivors. These questions exist at the end of each section so that you can provide more detail about the work being done in each area that the hard data doesn't capture on its own. We encourage you to report in the optional narrative questions as to help your program to most accurately capture the work you are doing with grant funds. We ask that you try not to use acronyms or abbreviations in your data. If you do use an acronym, please provide an explanation in each question where you use the acronym. Do not send attachments or extra documents containing data that is asked for in the report. Only data that is contained in the reporting form itself will be received and analyzed by MASCI staff. Finally, if you have any questions about reporting, give us a call or send us an email. We're here to help and will happily work through any scenarios or questions you have about your report. All right, so Section A1, Grant Information. We're moving on to the reporting form now. So for question 1, fill in the date your report is uploaded. Questions 2 through 4 will be pre-populated. Throughout the form, if you need more clarification about a specific question, click on the question mark icon, and more instructions and or examples will pop up. Question 5, type of grantee organization. Choose the one description that most closely resembles your organization. Question 6, point of contact. Provide contact information for the person who knows the most about the day-to-day activities of the grant program. This is a person we can call and ask questions about the data, and is not necessarily the project director or fiscal agent. This is really the project coordinator or administrator. Question 7, percentage of total operating budget. Please provide percentage of your total operating budget that is funded through OVW State Coalitions Program grant funding. Do not include other funding here. Do not include pass-through funding, only VAWA funding. Question 8. On the first 6 lines, please report the number of organizational members. This number automatically adds up on line 7. On the last line, report the number of individual members if applicable to a state coalition. Individual members are individual persons, not programs. Moving on to the next section, which is section A2, staff information section. So when considering reporting staff, only report FTEs for staff whose salary is provided fully or partially by grant funds. Include staff time of contracted workers as well. Report by activity performed rather than job title. If staff members fall into 2 or more categories, divide FTEs among applicable categories. Time should be prorated if necessary, such as when someone is part-time, was hired partway through the grant period, is a contractor, or is full-time but only partially funded by state coalitions program funds. Please report to the second decimal, for instance, 1.25 FTE. Please use the other categories sparingly. For the most part, all activities performed by staff are included in the listed categories. If you do use other, please be as specific as possible. This is the FTE cheat sheet. This slide shows some examples to help you calculate FTEs for the 40-hour full-time work week. FTEs should be based on the 26 weeks or 6 months reporting period that is just ending. In 6 months, there are 1,040 working hours. Alright, so now we have an example to help you calculate your FTEs. Your grant funds are used to fund one full-time systems advocate whose salary is 35% funded by a grant fund, and another full-time systems advocate whose salary is 50% funded by the grant. In this case, you would report only the percent of salary that is grant funded. The correct FTE under systems advocate would be 0.85 FTE, which you would calculate by adding 35% and 50%. Moving on to the next example, your grant funds a full-time employee who spends 16 hours a week coordinating the program and 24 hours a week providing technical assistance. In this case, you would divide staff time by function. The correct FTE under program coordinator would be 0.4 FTE, and again, you would get that number if you divide 16 hours by 40 hours, and 0.6 FTE under technical assistance provider. You would get that number if you divide 24 hours by 40 hours. Okay, and finally, example 3. The grant funded a full-time trainer who was hired 3 months into a reporting period. In this case, you would need to prorate the FTE to reflect 3 months out of 6 months reporting period. The correct FTE under trainer would be 0.5 FTE, and again, you would just divide 3 months by 6 months, and you would get the right number. Alright, so moving on to program activities. All grantees must complete this section. These are the only 2 questions where you can talk about other funding sources. So question 10, program activities, you should check all the program activities supported by state coalitions program funds that your coalition engaged in during the current reporting period. Question 11, other activities. You should indicate all other activities not included in question 10, which your state coalition engaged in during the current reporting period, addressed by your state coalition's program grant. In this question, you are also able to document activities funded by funding sources other than state coalition's program grant. Moving on to the next section, which is section C1, training. All right, so training is defined as activities for professionals or volunteers acting in the role of a professional to improve their response to victim survivors as it relates to their role in the system. Please complete this section if grant funds directly supported the training of non-grant funded people who are professionals or volunteers acting in the role of a professional. Do not count staff development or grant-funded staff or community education in this section. So when you're thinking about whether or not you're counting something as training, think about your audience. If you are presenting to a group that is typically not seen as professionals that work with victim survivors or offenders, you should question whether you're providing training or rather doing community education. All right, so here we have an example to help you calculate your training numbers. Grant funds supported 10 computer-based trainings that were offered statewide and focused on domestic violence and sexual assault. Grant funds also supported 2 workshops for DV professionals in the community. 1 conference and 2 teleconferences were provided by another funding source. So in this case, you would only report the 10 grant-funded computer-based trainings and the 2 workshops in question 12 because the other trainings were not grant-funded. Okay, moving on to the second question. So 110 professionals attended the grant-funded computer-based training events, 45 professionals attended the grant-funded workshops, 85 professionals attended the conference and teleconferences that were provided with other funds. All events were 2 hours long. In this case, in question 13, and I'm showing it to you on the screen, you would only report the 155 professionals that were trained with grant funds. You would also report the total number of person hours in each applicable professional category, which is determined by multiplying the number of people trained by the length of the individual training event. So this is how you would report these trainings here. So moving on to section C2, which is system advocacy. If state coalition program funded staff engaged in system advocacy, or if state coalition's program funds directly support system advocacy, then check yes and answer questions 16 to 19. If not, check no and skip to the next section, which is section C3. Question 16, system advocacy activities. For the purposes of this reporting form, system advocacy is an activity intended to affect policy and or procedural change in order to improve institutional responses to sexual assault and or domestic violence. For question 16, check all system advocacy activities that apply and indicate whether they were sexual assault or domestic violence activities or both. No federal appropriated funding made available under this grant program may be used directly or indirectly to support the enactment, repeal, modification, or adoption of any law, regulation, or policy at any level of government without the express prior written approval of OVW. In other words, there is no lobbying allowed. Question 17, and just give me a second here. Alright. Report total number of meetings convened in the first two columns and attended in the second two columns by state coalitions funded staff during the current reporting period. Report on the number of meetings attended, not the number of people or staff attending those meetings. So, for example, if you have 3 state coalitions funded staff attend one meeting with the child welfare agency, count it as one meeting. You should also count the meeting attended by staff that were partially funded by a state coalition's grant. Report the meetings convened or attended based on the group with whom you were meeting. If there were multiple agencies represented, count it as a multidisciplinary meeting. So, convened meetings are meetings that you arranged and hosted, and attended meetings, meetings you attended that were arranged and hosted by another person or agency. So, for example, 3 sexual assault state coalitions program funded staff attended a meeting with tribal government officials. Count this as one meeting attended with tribal government agency staff. Alright, question 18, coordination activities. Please check all that apply. Indicate methods used during the current reporting period to coordinate state victim services activities and or to collaborate and coordinate with federal, state, and local entities engaged in violence against women activities. So, for example, toll-free telephone number, website, email listserv, etc. Check all that apply. Tracking availability of victim services could include use of a database, other survey types, and data collection. Alright, so moving on to the next section, which is products. You would enter number of developed or revised, usually 1, title, topic, intended audience, number used, not printed, and if it was produced in another language. Identify in other or leave blank if not. If you did not develop or revise a product in that period but distributed it, fill everything out except number developed or revised. Likewise, if you just developed it but have not distributed it yet, fill out everything except number used or distributed. Alright, moving on to the next section, which is public awareness. If state coalitions program funded staff were used to support public awareness activities, or if state coalitions program funds were used to directly support public awareness activities, check yes and answer questions 21 and 22. If not, skip to section C5, which is technical assistance. So for question 21, public awareness, indicate the outreach efforts that were supported with state coalitions program funds during the current reporting period. Indicate by checking the appropriate box or boxes whether the focus of the activity was sexual assault, domestic violence, stalking, or a combination of those. Check all that apply. Moving on to the next question, which is question 22, which is a narrative box. So here you can indicate any additional information on the effectiveness of public awareness. An example might include developing a video series documenting the most effective advocacy provided to victims in rural areas. This results in more awareness of the challenges and successes involved in this work being brought to community events and training sessions. Alright, moving on to section C5, which is technical assistance. So if your state coalitions program funds were used for technical assistance during the current reporting period, check yes and answer questions 23 and 24. If not, skip to section C6, which is standards of service. So before we move on to the actual questions in this section, I would like to talk about the definitions of technical assistance, site visits, etc. So technical assistance is defined as a wide variety of activities designed to facilitate individual or agency change in some systematic manner by providing expertise to solve a problem. Examples of technical assistance activities include clarifying legislative and policy implementation and/or standards of service, technology consultations, and assistance with problem solving. Site visit is an in-person visit made to an agency or other location for the purpose of providing technical assistance consultation. Other technical assistance consultation is technical assistance consultations conducted by telephonic, electronic, or other type of contact other than site visits. Each contact should count as one consultation. So for question 23, number of technical assistance activities, please report a total number of technical assistance activities provided during the current reporting period, indicated whether they were site visits or other types of consultation. Question 24, topics of technical assistance. Please check all topics that were covered in the technical assistance activities reported in question 23. The technical assistance provided may be categorized by more than one topic. Grantees should make this determination. Check all that apply. All right, moving on to the next section, which is section C6, Standards of Service. All right. If you used the State Coalition's program-funded staff to develop or enhance standards of service, or if State Coalition program funds were used to directly support the development or enhancement of standards of service, please complete this section. So you would check yes and answer question 26. If not, check no and skip to section C7. Question 26, Standards of Service. Indicate if State Coalition's program funds were used to develop, implement, or enhance standards of service, or provide training on standards of service for member programs. Check all that apply. Moving on to the next section, section C7, Underserved Populations. So if State Coalition's program funds were used to develop or enhance standards of service for underserved populations, or to encourage the representation of underserved populations in coordination activities during the current reporting period, check yes and answer questions 27 and 28. If not, check no and skip to section C8. So before we talk about how to complete these questions, I would like to provide you with the definition of underserved populations. So underserved populations include populations underserved because of geographic locations, such as rural isolation, underserved racial and ethnic populations, populations underserved because of special needs, such as language barriers, disabilities, immigrant status or age, or any other population determined to be underserved by the state planning process in consultations with the U.S. Attorney General. So for question 27, activities addressing underserved population, check all activities listed that were supported with State Coalition's program funds to develop or enhance services for underserved populations, or to encourage the representation of underserved populations. Check the boxes in the appropriate columns to indicate whether the activities you engaged in were for sexual assault or domestic violence programs and services. Question 28, underserved populations. Indicate which underserved populations were addressed in the activities identified in question 27. Check all that apply. All right, and moving on to the final section. Section C8, Organizational Development and Capacity Building. If your State Coalition's funds were used for capacity building during the current reporting period, check yes and answer questions 30, and 31. If no, skip to section D, narrative. So question 30, coalition development and capacity building. Check all of the capacity building activities that were engaged in with state coalitions program funds during the current reporting period. Check all that apply. Capacity building means the investment in people, institutions, and practices that enables people and institutions to improve their problem-solving capacities and achieve their objectives. Do not report repairs or routine maintenance. However, if you upgraded your equipment and it allowed you to expand your technological capacity, you can report it here. Moving on to the next question, question 31, system privacy. Indicate whether you consider system privacy and or security when purchasing or developing software. This is purely a yes or no question. Alright, so section D, narrative, question 32, status of the State Coalitions Program grant goals and objectives. Report on the status of the State Coalitions Program grant goals and objectives as of the end of the current reporting period. Report only on the status of your approved goals and objectives. You should refer to your original grant proposal if you're not sure of your grant program's goals and objectives. Your OVW program manager will pay close attention to this question. This question enables them to monitor the status of your goals and objectives. Indicate whether the activities related to your objectives for the reporting period have been completed, are in progress, are delayed, or have been revised. You should include any additional information that you think of your OVW program manager needs to know to understand what you have and have not accomplished. Comment on your successes and challenges. If you have not completed your objectives that should have been completed during this reporting period, you must provide an explanation. You are only required to answer questions 33 and 34 once a year on the report for the January to June reporting period. However, if you choose to respond for the July to December reporting period, we will certainly analyze the data provided. So question 33, remaining areas of need. Report on what you see as the most significant areas of remaining need within your service area with regard to increasing victim safety and offender accountability. You should report not only on the needs of your program, but needs within the community, needs of the victim survivors, challengers, barriers, etc. These needs do not have to be related to the scope of your grant program. Question 34, State Coalitions Program funding. What has the State Coalitions Program funding allowed you to do what you couldn't and that you couldn't do prior to receiving this funding? For example, has the funding enabled you to identify gaps in service, improve culturally appropriate services to underserved populations, staff coalition office full-time, or increase the participation rate of historically underserved communities in coordination meetings? Be as specific as possible. If you have any information about what it was like before receiving State Coalitions Program funding that you can compare with results that occurred after receiving the funding, we would really like to know about it. We can use stories and statistics that you provide when we write our aggregate reports for OVW. Questions 35 and 36 are optional. Please limit response to 2 pages for these questions. So question 35, additional information on the effectiveness of the State Coalitions grant-funded program. Provide any additional information regarding the effectiveness of the State Coalitions grant-funded program. If you have not done so elsewhere on the form, you may want to report on systems-level changes, community collaboration, the removal or reduction of barriers and challenges for victim survivors, promising practices, and positive or negative unintended consequences. Discuss what you think are the key parts of the coalition's effectiveness. This question is not restricted to only grant-funded activities, but it is helpful if you identify whether the activity was supported with the State Coalitions Program grant. If you feel a certain aspect of your program's effectiveness is the result of the State Coalitions Program grant, but it was not actually supported with grant funds, you can discuss it in this question. Question 36, additional information on data. If you have any information that could be helpful in understanding the data you have submitted in this report, please answer this question. For example, if you submitted 2 different progress reports for the same reporting period, you may want to explain how the data was apportioned to each report. Or if you funded staff, for example, trainers, but did not report any corresponding training activities, you may explain why. Or if you did not choose program funds to support either staff or activities during the reporting period, please explain how program funds were used if you have not already done so in the appropriate section. All right. Validating your form. So once the form is completed, you must go to the last page of the form and click the Validate button. The validation process will highlight any missing or incomplete information and ask whether you wish to return to the section to review or change the data. When this happens, you may see one of the 2 warning messages. One type is a validation error message with the red X. If you receive this type of message, this means you're missing some of the required information. If you want to fix this error now, click Yes, and it will bring you back to the exact question on the form. If not, click No and continue with validation. Note, you will not be able to complete the validation process until you fix a validation error. The second type of warning is a reminder with the yellow exclamation point. This type of message indicates that something on the form looks like it may need to be corrected. So you do not have to make a correction to this form to successfully validate when you get this message, but if you want to review the field, click Yes, and it will bring you back to the exact question on the form. If not, click No and continue with validation. After correcting or completing missing information, return to the bottom of the form and press Validate until all sections of the form are complete. You will receive a 3rd warning message, which is not a warning at all, but a validation success. At this point, your form has been successfully validated and is ready for you to submit through GMS. Another reminder is to please use Maskey's RMA website for the following information to help you with your progress report. These are the products and information you can consistently find on our website. We also post important updates and notification letters from OVW regarding important requirements for new grant programs as the progress reporting forms become available for those programs. Alright, so if you have any questions as you are filling out the reporting form, please feel free to call or email Maskey, your program specialist, or GMS. All the contact information is on this slide. Alright, so thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this training was helpful to you. And as I said, if you have any questions, please reach out to us at Maskey. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.